Welcome to the With You and For You podcast. Our desire is to equip college-age students within the Edmond, OKC area by discussing topics and questions that are relevant to our generation. With that in mind, let's get to the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to the With You and For You podcast. As always, it is your host, Riley Jackson, along with the crew, as usual, Krista Dye, Tyson Hill, and Kyle Thomas. We're back. We're back, guys. It's, gosh dang it. Y'all just didn't talk.
I almost was like, oh, hey guys, but then I was like, I just feel like that's awkward. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh,
I just thought Riley would be able to like quickly go into the rest of his intro if there was like a second pause. But
Nope.
no.
He's expecting it now.
I'm expecting maybe a little bit of banner.
We've trained him. It's like Pavlov's dog.
I'm ready to start.
You ready to start?
We can get right into this.
Right
thing.
into the intro?
Yeah,
Right
less,
after he
less
says
a
our
video
names.
for people to skip.
That's true. That's tough.
Oh.
Oh, man. Wow. People got called out right there. So today we're going to be talking about dating. And we've talked about dating before about a year ago now. And today we're going to be taking a deeper look into an actual relationship in the aspect of dating. And what I mean by that is like the expectations that are expected and what you should be looking for, even what are the make or breaks in a relationship. So we oftentimes here within like Christian dating, we are dating with intentionality. We're dating with the intent to marry, right? What does that like exactly mean, and how do we pursue that?
I think for me and how I got married, I started off. Why am I being awkward to y'all?
No, you're okay.
Just a little bit.
Okay. But and like Kyle says, you don't have to do things my way, but this is how I did it. Whenever I asked my wife out, I prefaced it by saying, hey, look, I said, I'm in this to marry you. If you don't think you want to marry me, then say no, and I'll move on. But for me, it was like setting the tone even before we started dating of like, okay, like this is the goal. And then after that, I think besides the spiritual things, like there's a lot of practical parts of it if you're actually dating with the intent to marry. So you need to be having those conversations early and quick. Maybe not, on your first date where you're just hanging out, but so that you have a direction. Because like if you have no direction for your relationship, then like you're not dating with the intent to marry. You're just kind of dating. And so there needs to be these conversations that move you down the road to understand like, okay, like this is the timeline, this is what we want. If it's not working, let's back out, all these kind of things. But you really need to have conversations to start moving yourself down the road to get married. If you're not having those conversations at all, then you're just dating to date.
Is there a problem in that?
I think so.
Just
Yeah.
dating to date. What's the issue? With
Well,
like
what's the
dating?
point? Like, it's the same thing behind like marriage. Like there's a point to it. And so if we're dating in an intentional way, then we should have the mindset of, okay, I'm going to marry this person. If not, then what most likely will happen is that we're dating just to date, but not only that, we're dating just to like fall into our lustful desires. And so without that goal and that end goal, we're just kind of to the whims of ourselves, and ourselves are very sinful.
Well, and I think the thing is, and people get caught up on, is like the idea of dating for marriage. They put this huge like expectation on it, right? And that's not what we're talking about. Like, I'm sure if Tyson, when he would go on a date, like there's intentionality there, but it's like, oh, if there's on this first date, clearly there's no chemistry, like there's no connection, he's gonna be like, okay, hey, this isn't it, and so going on dates is a way to get to know somebody, and how you get to know them in a more, I would say, intimate like setting, as in, hey, it's not just us hanging out with a group of friends. It's, hey, we are sitting here, we're talking about each other, we're kind of getting to know each other, and we're seeing, all right, do we want another date to happen? Mm-hmm. And so it's not like on day one, I'm sitting there thinking, do I want to marry you or not? Do I want to marry you or not? Do I want to marry you or not? You know, like now there can be things that come up as like, oh, we definitely won't. Like we're not going to work. But it's also like, hey, I don't have to know by the end of date one, oh, yeah, this person is the one that I'm going to marry or is the one that I'm not going to marry. And I think Tyson said it perfectly. Like everyone's different. I've known people that they have gone on a blind date and they have known in blind date one, hey, we're going to get married.
It's wild.
It is wild. And that doesn't happen all the time. So don't maybe have those expectations, going in. But God can work that way. God can also work a way to where it's like, hey, we went on a date and then there was some, we dated for a little bit and then we kind of broke up and then we came back together and then we ended up getting married. So it's one of those, like, you can't expect or compare to other people's relationships. But I also want people to know, like, enjoy dating, have fun, don't put this pressure of, I'm gonna have to know by the end of this. Like, there's an exam coming up. Like, am I gonna marry this
Yes or
person or
no?
not?
I think then we had to do this last time, defining terms, because I think that Kyle's form or the word Kyle uses for dating is the word for dating, but sometimes dating can also equate to a relationship, and so like separating the two out. Where like if you're gonna go on a date with someone, if like there's no way I'm marrying this person, okay, don't go on a date with them.
Yeah.
But if there's like, okay, maybe yes, then like, yeah, have that dating period where you're trying to figure out, is this an option that I want to pursue? But still with the end goal of like, okay, like I'm going on a date with the intention that like I'm going to move down the road. And so whether that's down the road to, nope, we're not going on another date, or down the road to a relationship. But once you get to the term of relationship, if you're not having those conversations about marriage, that's where things can get really bad.
Yeah.
I agree. Like, yes, you should date with the intent to get married. But sometimes I also think as Christians, we can take this too far in the sense that we're sitting there and we're like, oh, I'm a Christian and this person's a Christian. So, like, we're going to end up getting married. Like, that's what is going to happen.
Yes.
And, like, I mean,
People
you guys
do
said
it.
it. Like, sometimes y'all aren't compatible. Sometimes, especially in college, like, life can just get different and they end up getting a job somewhere and move, or like whatever, or they feel called to go overseas and you don't, like then it is okay to break up. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, just because you are a Christian going on a date with another Christian does not mean that is going to end up in you getting married. Like, at the end of the day, you guys are still individuals, just like Kyle said, getting to know each other and assessing whether this is somebody that I would want to marry and spend the rest of my life with. Because you think about it, and that's a very big commitment. I mean, you're going to spend more time with that person than you probably ever will with anybody in your entire life. And that is just crazy to think about. But just because you guys are Christians and you guys kind of like each other does not mean that right then and there you're like, oh yes, I'm going to get married. Like, and so I just want to take the pressure off of that, of going on a first date and being like, well, if I don't marry this person, then I've failed or I've messed up or whatever. Like, breaking up is not sinful. It is okay. So just taking out that pressure of, yes, we date with the intention of marriage, but that does not always mean that the person you're going to go on your next date with is a person you're going to marry.
Yeah.
But it means it could, so please take
Yes,
showers.
yes.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
that's so true. Yes. But
I know. I think that this idea of dating and being in a relationship, there's so much like that can go wrong that can also go right. And so like there's so many ways and paths to do it, but like going through the middle of it is like, okay, like I want to be honoring God through it. And so that's the mark we're trying to hit. So like anything else is secondary to that goal. Like, okay, I want to hit the mark of honoring God on date 1, on date 2, on getting engaged, on being married, and everything else that happens, whether that's breaking up or having a really awkward first date, like that is all kind of secondary to the goal of like, okay, like me personally, I'm going to honor God in my dating and in my relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is really, I mean, what it comes down to is it's like, hey, I just want to honor the Lord in my life, and this is an aspect of my life, and I'm going to move forward in that, and not overcomplicating it, right? I think that's an important thing. And so, so if you are in the dating time frame, you're starting to date people, or you're not, I don't know. Focus in on, hey, I want to just honor the Lord, and recognize, and the same thing of like getting to know somebody as a friend, right? Like we overcomplicate it again because it's like, oh, dating, like, hey, there's physical attraction here, like all of these things, which are true, but it's also like, hey, when I was dating Nikki, like I'm getting to know the person that's now, I mean, my best friend, right? And so it's, hey, let's not make it this really huge thing so early on that then we're overwhelmed and we could be disrupting what maybe God's wanting to do, because we're just missing the point. So
Yeah.
So within, like, okay, just a hypothetical, going into like dates and stuff like that, date 1, date 2, date 3, what does the intentionality look like there of like asking specific questions, and what should be some things that you're looking for, either good or bad, to determine whether you should continue dating them or not?
what do you think, Riley?
Well, I'm asking you guys. That's
I asked you.
Okay, I'll just answer
Okay,
this question.
thanks.
I like truly, we've all hung out with people of the same gender, and we've met people like that for the first time, and we've learned more about them for the first time on a one-on-one setting. I mean, especially in ministry, we go on coffee appointments with freshmen and new students all the time to figure out their story. And like, the only difference is like with someone else, like Kyle said, like there's a potential of being your lifelong partner and friend. And so like the questions and the tone can be the same for that. Like just truly getting to know someone is caring about them and asking them questions to figure out about them. And so like for probably me and Kyle, this comes a lot easier than other people maybe. But really, I mean, just let conversation be conversation. I think when we put too much pressure behind like what questions should I ask someone on the first date, that is wild to me. Like, why can't we just go on a date and just talk?
yeah.
Because people can't do that.
That's
Yeah.
why.
Because people don't know how to initiate conversations
Yeah.
or carry on.
Yeah.
But that's, I mean, that's kind of a thing. It's like, and this is again, and I know my views of dating are a little bit different. And I tell people this all the time. I'm one of those that, hey, if you go on a date on Friday with somebody, there's no commitment unless you've communicated commitment to each other. It is completely acceptable for you to go on a date with somebody else on Saturday, because dates are getting to know somebody. In a date, you're going to get to know somebody. If somebody's too nervous to initiate and carry on conversation, and it's just like, hey, I found out that I want that. I want somebody that can initiate conversation. I didn't know that before. Okay, so this kind of now factors in. It's kind of like if you watch like kids, when kids are getting to know each other, they're interacting in groups, they're learning social cues, and they're realizing it's not okay to punch somebody in the face. Like it's not okay to lash out without my words and just, anger and physical violence. And so it's something, we have to tell them, hey, like you need to use your words, like you need to talk and not just hit Timmy in the face. But same thing with dating is I don't necessarily know the qualities I want. I mean, there are some things I can glean from scripture. Some things I can be like, okay, hey, I've seen this maybe in my parents, like, or I've seen this in somebody that I look up to. Those are qualities that I would like. But there are also other things that you'll learn through dating that can open your eyes to be like, hey, I don't want somebody like this, or I don't want this, or I don't want that, or I do want this, and I do want this. And so that's why, again, I say it. In dating, focus on honoring God first. So then, even if the relationship doesn't work out, neither one of you can argue that you weren't honoring the Lord. And both of you can look at it and say, hey, you know what? It didn't work out between us, but I have a better example of the person I'd like to marry. I just know some more things that I would like in that person, right? And so I would just encourage that. It's not like, oh man, okay, this person can't drive a truck. Like I think that's might be a silly red flag. It may not be. I don't know. Like I don't know your past history or anything like that. But just kind of walking through those things can help you see kind of the good, the bad, and it's one of those like, also don't go into something expecting to be able to change them.
Mhm.
If it is something that you're like, I don't really like this, don't be like, I'll just make them change it, because A, that's not what you want to do because they won't change it for the right reason, which means it probably won't stick. And B, it just is kind of manipulative, and that's not a good reason to be in a relationship either. So,
Yeah.
so it's better just to end it if that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that if you wanted to ask a question, I think like testimonies is a great first place to start.
Yeah.
Because, like, well, they need to be Christians.
Mhm.
And I mean, I'm not saying like, oh, if their testimony is not as polished as yours, run. But like, that is something.
If they don't have one.
Yeah, if they don't have one, then okay, then we need to not be dating this person. And
Then
so
you're on a
like,
gospel appointment, not
Yeah.
a date.
and so like, I think that that's a very important thing to figure out on date one is just to ask testimonies and like get to know like what their walk with the Lord looks like in that where it started, where it is now. I also think that when it comes to some of these like standards, whether it's driving a truck or whatever, that one thing I want to tell people is like it's okay.
Yeah.
It's perfectly okay to look for certain secondary things in people that you want to marry. And if that sets your standards pretty high, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like that's fine.
Yeah.
Like so many times people like think like, oh well, I'm just a mean person because I don't like this person because they do that. It's like no, if you don't want to date them for that reason, you're not married. So who cares?
Yeah.
So with like those secondary things, what should be and what should be some things that like are really important, like are not even secondary things, but what are things that should be really important to us, and what are some things that we should be a little bit flexible on? Because obviously, not everybody is going to like fit every single box. Where does the lenience fall on that?
I mean, I think there's some things like you think about, okay, hey, if this is a person I'm going to marry, like family. Do they want to have a family?
Mhm.
Do I want to have a family? And it doesn't mean, oh yeah, we've come to the conclusion, yes, we both want to have a family. That means we need to have a family right now. But if somebody's telling you, and again, because my thing is, when I was in college, I had some friends that dated, and then the ladies were like, hey, we feel like we may be called to singleness. And that's kind of what they're walking through at that time. Yeah, Chris is laughing because she's probably had a lot of people have those conversations with her. But they're walking through it at the time. And so that doesn't mean that it's not true if now they're married, okay? 13 years down the line, they're now married. Oh, well, they were lying to this guy. No. In that moment, that's what they were walking through. That's what they felt. And that's what they were walking with the Lord through. So even if somebody, like when it comes to family, it's like, oh, I don't know if I really want kids. Like, okay, that's where you're at right now. That doesn't mean it won't change. But here's the thing. I'm not going to marry that person that's saying, I don't think I want kids in the hopes that they will change 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Okay. If like, hey, I want kids, and they're saying, I don't want kids. Don't get married and be like, oh, well, hopefully they'll change their mind, and then when they don't, you're going to be bitter and you're going to be upset because it's like, I told you from the start, like, this is not what I wanted. It's okay.
Yeah.
You just say, hey, all right, well, hey, you know what? I've really had a great time. Like, I've really enjoyed our conversations and everything, but I don't think this is the relationship for us. Nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. So I would just say, whether they are maybe secondary, they could be primary to you and secondary to somebody else. Again, as Tyson mentioned, having those conversations are good conversations to have. It doesn't mean the relationship has to end. It doesn't mean the relationship has to continue. I mean, before Nikki, I dated somebody, wasn't super active and going to the church, and it's like, okay, hey, am I going to just completely end this when our relationship, it wasn't that I was saying, oh, well, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. Like, no, she saw, hey, church is important, and there's value in the community and everything. And so it's just kind of, again, some of those things to where, all right, hey, if this is something that's important, we need to talk about it. And we can have adult conversations without me trying to force you to do something and you trying to force me to do something. We can have these conversations and we can kind of come in line and be like, oh, hey, let's do this thing together, or let's try this together. Like,
Yeah.
So I would just say communication is a really big deal with some of those things.
Mhm.
But then some of the other things, if you're like set in stone on, like you're like, hey, I'm not budging on this, at least right now in my life, it's okay to share those. I know there can be fear in that because you're like, I don't know how this person will respond. It's better to say it than to like wait,
Yeah.
right? Because I dated a girl that she was very much feeling like she was called to go overseas. And at that time in my life, I had never been overseas. I didn't feel like I was called to go overseas. And I was kind of like, maybe running from it a little bit. And it's just like, we shouldn't have continued dating if, that was something that she was definitely like, this is what I'm going to do this. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
So why would we continue on in that? So,
Yeah, I don't know. And I think that, like, call to ministry, call to being full-time missionaries and stuff like that, these are things that if you are called to those things, you really are going to have a lot more conversations earlier. Because even when you get married, it's still going to be an adjustment period, and there's still going to be a lot of things that you have to talk through and this is really only to those people, like, it's hard to understand it until you're in it, until you have a spouse and you're gone for these ministry things. You have these priorities that kind of take you away from the home at times. And, like, it's just going to be some things you're going to have to talk through. And so if you're dating and you're called to ministry, you can have some of those conversations to start out with, and it might be a red flag for them. And that's okay. But, like, you really need to be intentional because, like, being the spouse of someone called to ministry comes with a lot of challenges that other people may not understand and that are hard. And so it's still something you need to be, like, open and forthcoming about in your walk. Because when you get married, it's still going to have a lot of conversations behind it as well.
Yeah, I even think, especially just even going off of that, I remember when I was like beginning to like come and join staff at UCO BCM, and I had, and still to this day, I have to support raise my salary. And I don't know why I had this in my mind, but I was so scared that if I were to come here and start dating somebody and told them I was a support raise missionary, they'd be like, oh, well, like, I don't want to date you because that just doesn't seem stable to me. Like, it scared me. And so I remember with Micah, when we were, beginning to talk about finances and things like that. And I told him, I was like, I was always so scared because I'm like support raising. This is what I'm called to do. And like, I'm not budging on that because for the time being, like, this is what I'm called to do. And if you're not here for it, like, then you're gone kind of thing. And I remember talking to him about that, and he was like, that's stupid. And I was like, oh. And he was like, I've never had any doubts or questions or anything
That's
about any of that.
that's why we like Micah.
Yes. And I was like,
Straight to the point.
okay,
Straight
yes.
to the point.
And that's why, in that moment, I was like, it was just so much peace that I was like, okay, like, he is on board with like the things that the Lord has called me to do and supports me in those things. And I support him in the things that the Lord calls him to do and all of those things. Even if it's not like vocational ministry, but just things in ministry. So yeah, I think there's a lot that, like, considering, especially like Kyle's been saying, like, in your life at that time, like, at this time I was moving and I was support raising my salary and I was doing these things. And those are things that I was like, hey, I'm not budging on these things. And like, can those things like change and things like that? So I just kind of wherever you're at, like, in the season of life, I think, but obviously, and I like that Kyle had mentioned this about Nikki, but also like just evaluating their relationship with the Lord, and like, are they active in the church? Are they serving? Because again, like, even if they're not, and especially ladies who are really guilty of this, we can go into a relationship and be like, oh, well, I'll just change them a little bit, or I'll push them to this. And you're reversing the roles of who is supposed to be the spiritual leader in the relationship. Obviously, you guys aren't married yet. But if you go into that mindset and you do get married, then you're going to spend a lot of your marriage more praying for your husband than with your husband. And you're going to be spending a lot more time, like, trying to lead him and make him into who you're wanting him to be, than allowing him to lead you because you didn't marry a leader because you thought that you could change him. And that is not the way the Lord had designed it. So.
So this next question is kind of for each one of you. I really want to hear from all of y'all on this one. what was the process like of knowing that they were the one, of like getting to that point? Because you guys are all three married now, which is awesome, and I'm so happy for y'all. And
Shut up. Move on. Get to your question.
So how did you know at a certain point
Thought
when
we
they
answered
were
this in the last one.
the one?
Did we not
It's
answer this
been
in
a
the last
year.
one?
I don't know.
don't
Okay.
think so.
Then I'll start because I'm a matter of fact person, and so there wasn't this like aha moment. It was just like, all right, cool. And so it's not as romantic. I know. I'm sorry.
Sounds super
I'm sorry.
Wow.
But like, there's no like,
light shines down.
yeah. But it was just like,
Tyson
okay.
smacks the light out of the way. All right, cool.
But it was just like, okay, like I could see myself marrying this person and like going into dating. Like I had that intentionality, and so we just moved down the road, and there was never anything to make us back out, and so I got married. But I know it's not romantic, guys. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
If you're looking at me for romance, I'm sorry, but it just very much like moved down the road, and like there was nothing getting in the way, and so I was
There it
like,
is.
all right,
Here we are.
here we are, 3 years later.
Matter of fact, right there. Yep. Okay. Somebody else. Krista.
Okay. Well, I think for me, like, kind of also what Carl had said of like just dating other people or like whatever, just assessing kind of like what I was looking for. And honestly, and I know this may sound really dumb, on our first date, I didn't know if I was going to marry Micah, but there was something that had happened that I was very much like, this is very, like, I don't know a lot of guys that would do this. When we were going on our first date, we went on a Sunday, and Saturday night, one of my friends from Tulsa texted me, and very good friend of mine, Jilly, she texted me and she said, hey, me and Riley are going to be in OKC tomorrow. Can we come see you? And I have not seen her in a couple of months, and I missed her. And I was like, hey, I'm actually going on a date tomorrow, but let me talk to him. So we got in the car on Sunday. We got in the car after church, and I was like, hey, Micah, I was like, one of my really good friends is going to be in town. Is it okay if they come and see us? And he was like, yeah, I don't care. And I don't know what it was about that, but that to me was just such a big deal in the sense that he was like, to me, that just said that he was like, hey, I see that like you have these friends that you love and have invested in you, and you have invested in them, and like I want you to be able to have these friendships, and I don't want to control this situation going on. So Jilly and Riley were actually on our first date, which was really funny. But I even think like there was just a lot of little things throughout our relationship. Like I remember the day Micah told me he wanted to marry me. We've been dating for a month, and we went to it was about to be Thanksgiving break, and I was like going back home to Tulsa, and he was going back to Texas, and he was like, hey, before you leave, like, let's go get breakfast. And I was like, okay. So we went, got breakfast, and he sat down, and he was like, I want you to know I want to marry you. And I was like, wait, what? And I was like, it's only been a month. And I had all these thoughts and feelings of just like, I was very much like, well, what are my parents going to think? I've only been dating this guy for a month. I've only known him for like 2 or 3 months. And I just had all these things of like, what will people think? Things like that. And Micah was like, what are you thinking about? And I said, I'm thinking about what other people are going to think about. And he said, I don't care what other people are going to think about. What do you want? And I was like, I think I want to marry you, but I'm just not totally sure right now. And he was like, okay. And then we talked about it more. And then like that week, I kind of was praying about it, and I kind of came to the conclusion that I was like, I want to marry Micah. And in that week too, I was like, my family's going to think this is crazy. And I remembered praying, and I just was like, Lord, like, please allow conversations to happen. And so that week I was at home, and my mom, like, of all people too, was like, we were just sitting there talking, and she was like, so how are you, Micah? And I was like, we're good. And she was like, do you think you'll marry him? And I was like, I was just not expecting that question. So there was just a lot of like things like that were just lining up that I had been praying about, and obviously praying about marrying Micah. But again, in all of that and things I've said, like I evaluated his relationship with the Lord. I also really evaluated the people he hung around with. And I think that's a very big aspect. Like I looked at who are the guys that were pouring into him? Are these guys that I want to be pouring into him? And even now, like I see that, and sometimes he'll be like, hey, me and the boys are going to go hang out. And I'm like, please go. Like that is like your people and the people that invest in you. And so I was looking at that, and I was looking again, just how he pursued the Lord, and also like how he treated and respected me just in all aspects. And again, I think it also comes down to a lot of just like conversations we had and just like again the things we were wanting, even like as we were moving towards engagement, even talking about like, yes, we do want to have kids, yes, we do like want to stay here, like all those things. So there's, I mean, a lot of different factors, but I also think a lot of people sometimes will be like, well, this may be a weird thing to talk to the Lord about or pray about, but pray about it, like point blank. Like I remember I had a lot of conversations with the Lord, just being like, Lord, like, should I marry Micah? And there was just a lot of conversations in that the Lord had just led me to saying, I mean, yes. So, but yeah, I'd say that. And also, I mean, just again, like, what do other people say about him? Like, how do they view him? And things like that. So there's a lot of different factors, but again, I think those are just the main, just evaluating like his relationship with the Lord, the people he was hanging out with, and people that were investing in him, and just how he was treating me through this whole process, understanding that with Micah, I was going to get what I was going to get. Like there was no changing him. And that is the same even today. I mean, he still is crazy and loves D&D, and I will not change that, but that is fine. But again, it's like, okay, like, is this who I can see myself marrying for the rest of my life and spending the rest of my life with? Because like, this is what I'm going to get. So, yeah.
Heck yeah.
Okay, Kyle, it's your turn.
Oh, Micah and Krista, they were like giddy little girls at a Build-A-Bear. Telling you what.
You should have seen them. That's crazy.
Yep, they were. Yeah, we knew before you knew.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, no,
yes.
that's probably very true.
You guys were
And,
hanging out almost every
Do
day
you
in
think
your
Tyson
office.
for
Crazy.
Micah telling you he wants to marry you after a month of dating?
Probably, yeah. And the matter of factness to it. When you said he
No.
said no, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Not what do other people want to do. I was like, I've asked Micah that exact question before.
Yeah, 100%. What a time. So here's what I will say, because a lot of times we put a lot of pressure on the one, right? And we overthink it. And then we start to think, this is going to be the person I spend the rest of my life with. It's a choice. You make the decision. Every day, I make the decision, hey, I'm going to love Nikki over the things that I desire. And if you are not willing to do that for the person that you are in a relationship with, then you are not ready to get married. Not just to them, but period. Because it is a decision, a choice you make every day, you make every hour, every minute. And there are times where, yeah, you fall short. But when it comes to the one, like, yes, I knew I want to marry Nikki. Outside of other girls I dated, I knew I wanted to marry Nikki. Why? Because I knew I want to sacrifice everything for her. I want her to have it all. I don't care. Like, I will give it up for her. And so that's kind of what it comes down to. Is, hey, am I willing to give up myself for this person? And then that's why, because marriage is a representation of Christ and his relationship with the church. Like, Christ gave up himself for the church, all of him, died for the church. In the same way in marriage, I have to be willing to die for Nikki on a consistent basis. And so if you're dating and you've been dating for a while, and you see all these other people getting engaged and getting married and all these things, and you start to think and flirt within your mind like, okay, hey, is it our time because we've been dating for so long? It's irrelevant. Time is irrelevant when it comes to, oh, we've been in a relationship for so long, we should get married. Now, I do think there are times where it's like, hey, you've been dating for 15 years,
What are you doing?
it's time.
Yeah.
But if you cannot answer that question of like, hey, I'm willing to give up myself for them, I'm willing to sacrifice my desires for that person, so that they can succeed, so that they can have the, then yeah, you're not ready. They're not the one. So I would just encourage people in that. If you're in a relationship or you're in a dating relationship and you've been dating for a little bit, now here's the thing. It also doesn't have to happen after a month of dating. there's not this time frame of like, oh well, we've been dating for 6 months, and so where are we at? Okay, because I do think there are people that if you sit down after a month of dating somebody and say, hey, I want to marry you, it's going to freak them out. You need to kind of read the room a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's something that, I mean, Chris's personality, everything that's going to work.
Yeah.
And even, again, like you want to be clear in your direction, but there's also understanding of like, hey, kind of where are we at? Like Nikki, she knew that she wanted to, like, she would be in to marry me way before I did. And by way before, I mean like maybe a month or two. But it was just kind of, that can be a long time when it's like, hey, you're not in school. Like we see each other more on a consistent basis. And so it wasn't like she was like hounding me saying, hey, where are you at? Where are you at? Where are you at? Like she really was patient and let me, kind of come to that conclusion of, yeah, like I'm in. I want to marry you. So I would just encourage people, hey, if you're not willing to give up your life for that person, then you're not there yet. And that's okay. But if you're, just dating, and that's kind of where you can determine that, like, oh, hey, we're just hanging out now, like, then what are we actually doing in this relationship?
I think yeah, like not being ready to get married or not wanting to get married for the reason, even if like, okay, I don't want to lay down my stuff for their stuff. That's fine. Don't look at that as like, oh, you're a horrible person.
Yeah.
Like, that's fine. Like,
Yeah.
it's not a bad thing to be in that place. And also, it's not a bad thing that if the time frame for both of you is not lining up, and one of you decides, like, okay, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore, then that's fine too. So, like, that's the being in a relationship and being married is like about being one together, especially in marriage, about being one.
Yeah.
And so if things aren't lining up before that and it's not happening for both of you, the time frame's not, he's someone who wants to get married a month after knowing you, you want a few years, that's okay. Like, once again, there's so much pressure behind knowing they're the one or behind all this dating stuff and going on a first date, asking a girl out, that like we all put on ourselves.
Yeah.
There is nothing from the Lord coming down and saying, you need to know right now who you're going to marry right now, or you're not going to be used for my kingdom in the right way. No. Like, you are still just as capable of serving the Lord fully, whether you're on date one or you're married or you never get married. So, like, there doesn't have to be this pressure, and, like, we just all put it on ourselves because of what we think other people think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily what we want even. And so we oftentimes will sacrifice some of the things that we know we want, or some of the time frame that we want, because we think other people think away.
Yeah.
And like, that's fine. And some people will date someone way too long just because they think that people like them together, and they knew date 3 that they shouldn't date. Then it's like, it's okay. Like, take a deep breath, realize that yes, a lifelong commitment to marriage is a lot. But like Kyle said, it's one day at a time. Every decision is a day down the road. And so in dating, in a relationship, in a marriage, all the decisions just move you one step down the road. And so we don't have to look at it as, well, how the heck am I going to be married to this person when I'm 40 and we have 3 kids? You're not 40 with 3 kids now. So look at, okay, what am I going to do today to honor the Lord in my relationship? What am I going to do today to honor the Lord in my marriage? What am I going to do today to honor the Lord in my singleness? And like, just take a deep breath, guys.
Yeah.
You'll get married. For the most part, most people listening will get married, okay? So take a deep breath. It'll be all right.
Yeah. So just to kind of wrap it up with dating, I want to finish with like what Tyson said. It's okay. Like it's really okay. And I know there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure within, honestly, a lot of Christian communities to date and to get married, especially really young. But I want to encourage you all and say that it's okay. We can take a step back. There's not really a time frame, kind of like what Kyle said. Be intentional, though. Have fun with it. Be intentional in getting to know the people that you do go on dates with. And from that, like if you want to keep pursuing them and getting to know them, date them, get in a relationship with them. If you don't and see that's the end, that's okay. End it. It's really all right. And I think I think, like I said before, we put a lot of pressure on it. But I really want to encourage you guys by with just saying that it's okay. Take it easy and have fun.
That's right.
Take it easy and have fun.
Have fun.
Have fun, because it's fun. It's a good time. Don't stress about it too much.
That's right.
Yeah. So, do you guys have anything else to add before we end
I
it?
do want to say something else just on like kind of talking about just like comparison. In the sense of like, well, those people got married after a year of dating or whatever, and I'm a year and a half in, like, what are we doing kind of thing. Like, just focusing on just you and your significant other, because like that, like, I mean, if you guys get married, like, then y'all are a team, and you're not gonna, if you do that, then it's gonna carry over into your marriage of like comparing your marriage to other people. And I say that because like there's been a lot of instances, even just like with social media on this topic, and I just want to talk about this really fast because I've even been there. I had this whole moment even like a month ago with Micah where I had been on Instagram and I had just been looking at all these reels, and it was just like, oh, going to church with my husband, like blah, 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 like all these things. And so in my mind, I was like, we have to do everything together. Like we have to go to Sunday school together. We have to do these things together. And then like in talking to him about that, he was like, you know, like I kind of think I want to go back to like just being in the college group because like that's just where I feel like I'm growing. And I had been thinking about serving, but in my mind, I was like, well, if I start serving, then we won't go to Sunday school together. And like, that's what all these other couples are doing kind of thing. And so we had that conversation, and he was like, this is how this is how we should do it if this is what is going to work best for us. And so anyway, I say all of that because even in marriage, or especially in dating, you see all these things on social media, or you see all these couples are dating and they post all these things. But I also want you to understand, like, and I know you guys know this, but that's the picture that they want you to see. And you don't have to compare whatever that picture is to wherever you're at in your relationship. Like, obviously, if you guys are just wasting time, then maybe you guys should have a conversation. But if you're sitting there and you're like, hey, we're, like, this is a perfect example. Anna and Pedro started dating a week after me and Micah, and they're getting married this May, whereas me and Micah got married last October. So was it wrong for them to not get married earlier? No. Like, they were like, hey, we kind of want to wait until we're both graduated and have these things figured out. So that was their timeline. Like, they were not comparing their timeline to me and Micah's timeline. So, like, whatever it is between you guys, like, just focus on you guys and your timeline. And stop comparing yourself to other couples or just other couples that you don't even know on social media. Like, that is just the thing that just gets me. Because I have been there, and I bet a lot of girls have also been there. But, yeah, just stay true to your significant other and focusing on, this is our timeline. We are doing what is honoring to the Lord right now, and this is what we feel like He has called us to do, and we have to wait a little bit longer than this couple did, but that's what God has called us to do. So that's what we are going to do, even though our timeline doesn't look like everyone else's around us.
Yeah.
So.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. With that, I think that's a great way to just end it. Awesome. So thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for hanging out with us. Be sure to tune in next week where we'll be having another awesome discussion. And if you want more information or want to ask us a question, make sure to follow us on Instagram at UCO BCM.